built in 1860. It was built entirely by enslaved craftsmen in just 5 months. All right, if you want to follow me inside. Let you guys go in first. I'll bring up the rear. I don't think she does. Alright, so today we've talked about a lot of the different jobs people had on the plantation, and one of those was architecture and carpentry. There were very skilled carpenters and architects who worked on this barn. What's incredibly unique about this barn is that if you look up at the ceiling, it's basically a giant ship turned upside down. It was built using shipbuilding techniques, which is extremely unusual to find in Piedmont, North Carolina, fairly far away from any major rivers or oceans or anything. One example of this is if you look right above us here, there are 2 beams coming down right towards the ceiling, and then beams shooting off of those to form a triangle. And at the bottom there's just 1 peg going through it. That's known as a Queen Anne's truss. And that 1 peg is holding the entire thing together. That was used for the bottom of ships. If you think of it upside down, that's where you could store things in the hull of the ship. Let's see, we also have a scarf joint. You want to look right above me here. This Z cut in the wood with a little wedge in between and a wooden peg going through it. That's known as a scarf joint. That's also used in shipbuilding to help with the stress and strain of the waves and the water. They used wood on wood in shipbuilding, particularly because the wooden stake would sort of mold with the boat, whereas a nail, over time it might rust or it might just pop out. So it's very unusual that they decided to use this here when clearly that's not going to be a big issue. As you can see over there, about 75 would have been kept in here at one time. If you have any questions for the mule keeper, you can ask him right here. I'll give you all a minute just to look around, pet the mules. Is that they were purchased from a plantation further on the East Coast where shipbuilding was more common, and then they were purchased by the Finnegan Cameron family and brought here and decided to use the techniques that they did know and alter them to build a barn. And another theory is that while none of the enslaved people here came directly from West Africa, all of their ancestors were from West Africa. And it's a possibility that they simply learned that technique on the coast of West Africa and passed it down throughout generations. After the Civil War, the people were freed, but they were not given anything. A lot of them did leave, but with the racism and prejudice in the area, it was difficult for them to move ahead very much. Many of them did end up coming back and signing on as tenant farmers with Paul Cameron. With this arrangement, they were out working the same field, living in similar conditions, except they had to give 3/4 of their income to the Cameron family. So that is one way in which the effects of slavery have been felt long after the Civil War. One of these slave cabins you may have noticed, the white one with the red roof, you may not have thought it was a slave cabin actually, but it used to be. It was lived in continuously up until 1954 by tenant farmers who were relatives of people who did work here at Stagville as slaves. Right now we're heading back to the visitor center where you can enjoy some cake and cider, and we have a Thomas Day craft. Thomas Day was an